Hey, this is Ace Atkins, and join me this week on One Final Twist.
Thank you for joining us. We are this week we are joined by crime novelist extraordinaire Ace Atkins. He has a new novel coming out on December the 2nd called Everybody Wants to Rule the World. We're going to talk about that a little bit today and some of his other writing. So please welcome Ace Atkins.
Well, thanks very much, Scott. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. I'm Scott. That's Teresa. She's my cohort in this. So tell us a little bit about Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
Well, it's funny with Everybody Wants to Rule the World. What I tell people it's I've written 31, this is the 31st book that I've written. And I tell people this book is 40 years in the making. Um, this is a story I've been thinking about since I was a teenager, since I was 14 or 15 years old, living in Atlanta. And it's really kind of the first, I had a very active imagination as a kid and growing up in the mid 80s, you pretty much thought that there were, Soviet spies everywhere lurking about. And it just was something that I had been wanting to write this novel. And then as I got older, also just bringing this era alive. I never really thought about it when I first got started, but of course now when I was talking to my editor about the story, it's now considered a historical novel, which I don't think about the 80s being a historical. I think about, men in powdered wigs and women in petticoats and that kind of thing being a historical novel. But yeah, the 80s now, as we are, this book takes place exactly 40 years ago.
Yeah. Um, I don't like asking people how old they are, but how old I'm
No,
52 and I was 14 when this novel takes place.
well, I was 14 and 15 when this book took place,
Yeah.
and so my memories of the mid 80s are very clear. I love that era. I really loved being a Gen Xer and growing up during that time. I was, it was, I think for all of us that did experience the 80s, we had a very similar experience. I mean, because pop culture was narrowed tremendously at that time. So we were all watching the same networks, we're watching the
Mhm.
same TV shows.
Yeah.
A lot of us were listening to the same music, top 40 music at that time. And then, of course, we had MTV, which is really hard unless you were there to understand what a massive cultural influence that was.
Exactly. Uh, I was very rural. So we had the basic three networks. We did not have MTV here. Uh, we did not have MTV here because it was cable, and we just didn't have we were southern country folk, and we had AM FM radio and CDs, and soon after that cassettes. But I've read this book, and Teresa hasn't yet, I don't think.
I haven't read this one.
You are in for a absolute treat with this book. I don't think anybody could have gotten any more 80s nostalgia than what's in this book. I mean, it starts off in the beginning and it doesn't stop. And I my favorite of all time is, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's Tina Turner.
Oh,
And
wow.
Tina
One of my
Turner
favorites.
plays a huge role
Yeah.
in this movie or in this
Yeah.
book. And I call it a movie because it in my mind it plays like a movie. Was that your intention when you wrote this, that it would maybe get a big screen or a small screen adaptation?
It did, and you hear authors say, "Oh no, I've only written the book, and you can take with it what you want to." But what I wanted to do in creating this story again, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, and so you always have a sense of what you want the book to feel like, what you want a reader to have the aesthetic sense of what you're trying to do here. And for me, I used to love watching movies on VHS
Mhm.
and going to your local, before even the days of Blockbuster, you had your corner video store where you'd come in and you would get these films. Some of them were great, some of them were terrible. The market was flooded with sometimes straight to VHS
Oh
movies, that
yeah.
kind of thing. But I wanted to make something that wasn't just about nostalgia, but something that really felt like it was of the period. And it was something that, so yes, no, I thought very much about how this would feel like a mid 80s movie, like something you'd even see from Amblin Entertainment that did the Spielberg movies and
Oh
things like
yeah.
Goonies, and those were very huge in my uh, as a kid. I mean, reading those movies and the John Hughes films and things like Adventures in Babysitting, and those, there's always a sense of danger, but also a sense of fun.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think today the landscape right now, especially in crime fiction, again, I've been doing this quite some time. A lot of it's real downer stuff. It's it's just about if I've got to see another story where somebody comes home to their community and there was a killer years ago, and they've experienced this trauma and whatever, and really what I wanted this book is to be fun. I wanted to be like you were getting a VHS film, popping it in your player. You had your Pizza Hut or Domino's and you're watching this film, and so it's very much of my time for sure.
The I as I got out of high school, I just my goal in life was to own a video store.
Mm.
So I did. I started one back in the mid 90s when they were on every corner,
Wow.
before the influx of high-speed internet. Of
Yep.
course, being in the South and rural, we that was a thing that we never even dreamed of,
Yeah.
and but my video store, I mean, I had one of the biggest, flashiest. I had all the marquees and everything you could imagine. But this book, it hits all the right notes as far as doing justice to the period. I mean, there's so much of the pop culture that you incorporated into the story. Like it's just there. That was just how life was growing up in the 80s. And I think you did a masterful job of incorporating it into this story.
Well, thanks, Scott. And I worked at a video store in Auburn, Alabama,
Oh wow.
back in the 1980s. I was one of the worst employees ever because I spent too much time talking to the client, the people, customers coming in about movies, what they would rent. And apparently I was pretty judgmental on what boxes they were picking up at that time. But that was my education. I mean, it was wonderful. I was hanging out at the video store so much, and of course we didn't have Blockbuster, we didn't have things like that, and
Yeah.
in Lee County, Alabama. It was a small Alabama chain, but that was my film education. That's how I got into just loving movies. It really is. But yeah, it was. This is a unique story to tell, and the fact that it doesn't really have things I can say, oh, it's like this book, or it's like that book, or it's like whatever's come out recently or whatever. It really is something that was a story that I told myself as a kid. And as I got older, I said, I'm not getting any younger. This is something I've got to lay down. And so the characters like Peter Bennett, who's not the main character, but one of the main characters, is a 14-year-old kid in 1985, like I was.
Mhm.
His interest in music, his interest in crime fiction and books and paperback books you see behind me. When I wasn't hanging out the movie store, the video store, I was hanging out the used paperback store.
Yep.
Uh, and I love that. I mean, I love the physical media. I think kids really are missing out on that, being able to have the physical media, going to a store, picking out your video box, or going to the record store and getting your album or cassette, whatever, going to a used paperback store as opposed to that physical media really meant a lot. So there's a lot of me in Peter, and of course the catalyst for the whole book was really just a very simple idea. Is He's a 14-year-old kid. His mother is a single parent. He's living in suburban Atlanta, and his mother starts dating this man who he does not necessarily like. He thinks something's up, but not only does he think the guy's a creep, he thinks he may be a KGB agent that's embedded in America. And that's it. That's the whole story. That's how you get into it. And
Yeah.
so there are Russians in this book. There are FBI agents. There is a former pulp writer, a guy named Dennis Hotchner, who worked at a bookstore that I used to frequent, a place called Oxford 2 in Atlanta at that time. It was a real bookstore based on a real character. And then his best friend is a guy that was part of the big drag scene explosion of the mid 80s in Atlanta, which was a historical moment. That's where RuPaul came out of. It was a big deal at that time.
Mhm.
A guy named Jackie Johnson, who goes under the name of Jackie Demure. And that goes back to Scott's earlier comment. His claim to fame is he does a mean Tina Turner. And so I was a kid, man. I loved, I loved Tina Turner. So it was
Oh,
very easy for me to get into that mindset and understand, the fast stage. Tina Turner was one of my heroes.
yeah. When the Danielle reached out from William Morrow and said, you may want to read this book. And I get a lot of offers, and I read this and I said the first two or three lines was 80s spy Atlanta. And I was like, absolutely, I want to read this book. And as soon as I got it, I tore through it in just a matter of a few days. This one is set in Atlanta, and some of your other works, they're in Memphis and other areas south. And you're in Oxford, right?
I live in Oxford, Mississippi.
So you're kind of midway, kind of like me to Memphis. I live less than 2 hours to Memphis. What draws you to the southern setting? Memphis, Atlanta.
Really speaks to me.
Yeah, yeah. What speaks to you about the southern setting, the southern cities?
Well, I mean, for me, I am a Southerner. My parents are both from Alabama. My family goes back in Alabama forever, back until the original settlement. So I come from a very deeply rooted Southern family. So I understand these people and I understand these characters. I mean, one of the things I really hate is when you have people from outside the South that are writing Southerners, and you can tell they just don't get it. They don't understand it. And I do
Exactly.
think that you have to be here or from have to have come from the Southern culture to really appreciate it and get it. So this is a world I just like writing about Southerners. I like writing about the good parts and the bad parts and then different part, all that stuff is fascinating to me. So I live right outside. I live in Oxford, Mississippi, but it's about an hour away from Memphis. So
Yeah.
my hometown is Oxford, but my city is Memphis. That's where
Yeah.
that's where I go to shop, and that's where I fly out of. There are friends in Memphis, so Memphis is very close, near to me. And then Atlanta, when I was a kid, my dad was a football coach, and so he, I was born in Alabama, but we ended up living a lot of different places. But when I was 10, 11 years old, we moved back to the South and we moved to Atlanta. Of course, some people I would argue is Atlanta really the South? It's a longer discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
Atlanta is complicated. Atlanta, in many ways, it is geographically Southern, but culturally Southern. It is not as Southern as a place like Memphis. It's a place really populated by people from all over the place. So it's a really national and can be an international city. But I just, at that time from the mid 80s, I just remembered it very well. And a lot of the places I write about no longer exist.
Yeah. The You mentioned your dad was a football coach and you played football at Auburn.
I
So
did.
is there anything you relate from the football field into your writing? Do you any of your mindsets or anything like that?
Well, it was very easy. It was easy for me to write the character of Jackie Johnson, Jackie Demure, Jackie, one of the top drag queens in Atlanta. He had been former Atlanta Falcon defensive end, so I was able to write that character as far as understanding being a defensive end very well. He probably looks a lot better than I than I would in drag. I don't think I could I don't know if I would be that pretty, but not really. I mean, football was. I was a scholarship player at Auburn. You can see my football helmet up behind there.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I think there's a certain amount to draw upon as far as practice makes perfect and working hard, and I do think that in writing, for me, you're only as good as your last season and your last book. So that's a mentality I try to get is with each book, I try to top something and try to make something different. I never want to write something that feels like the last book or something I'd done previously. And so that is something I draw upon with football.
I got you. Um, you were also you covered a crime beat in Florida. That also obviously would help with your crime novelist stuff, is there anything you took from any stories you covered in on the crime beat into your novels?
Scott, that's probably to me more important. I get a lot of questions talking about, when I played football when I was a kid, 30 plus years ago, what that was like. But as far as my formative experience being a writer, I didn't really, I was a big fan of reading crime novels, and you see all this stuff, spy fiction behind me, Ian Fleming, John D. MacDonald, uh, Elmore Leonard, James Lee Burke, all that stuff, was very important to me. And I was reading it, but I didn't necessarily uh, know the real world connection. And when I was in my 20s, I was very fortunate, and I cultivated this. I was looking to do it. I was a crime beat reporter for the Tampa Tribune, and that meant every day when I woke up, there was something horrendous, exciting, funny, tragic that had happened the night before or happened while I was at work.
Yeah.
So I got an incredible education, not only as a writer, working with some really talented editors who taught me how to write and how to tell a story and how to get to the point, but meeting people from every level of society, every background, people that have gone through incredible events, and sometimes tragic, sometimes funny, sometimes exciting. It was a I couldn't do what I do without it. I mean, yes. I mean, there's been a couple books where I really take direct stories from something that I covered up close. But for the most part, it was just getting that life experience of seeing how that works. I could never do what I'm doing today without that. I'm so fortunate that I got to work for the Tampa Tribune at a time. The paper, when I was there, was 120 years old, and it was a long, big metro newspaper in Florida. It was one of the biggest newspapers, big major newspaper, and now it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I really was one of those guys. I got in at the very tail end of being a big city newspaper reporter and that kind of thing, and had that experience. And all that stuff is gone now. I really hate it. I love the job.
Yeah. Do you see how, you know, our society today is almost an on-demand type society where they consume immediately and then 24 hours later it's gone? Do you see that in your books as far as the interest in your books? How they does I can imagine writing, and releasing a book back 20 years ago, how you would that would last for months. Do you see a difference now with the on-demand type stuff?
I
And
mean, it is considerably different uh, when I got into publishing 25 years ago.
Mhm.
Now, you know, being published was quite a big deal when I was in the 1990s.
Mhm.
That meant a publisher selected your manuscript from piles and piles of submissions. That meant that they recognized it as being as something of quality, and most importantly, they recognized it as something that could make money for them. That it was something that they believed in. And now, I mean, anybody can upload a book on Amazon. We could do it right now. We could take our transcript from our talk right now. We could have it uploaded on Amazon in 2 seconds. We could have it bound, and it could be in the nonfiction section of an interview. I mean, it's just amazing how quickly that stuff happens. But I do think, going to your point, maybe I'm answering your question, Scott, I'm not sure, but people's uh, attention span is much shorter,
Yeah.
much shorter. I mean, the idea, I was watching a TV show the other night and showed a guy in Italy going and having his cup of coffee and reading the morning newspaper. Uh, I don't think people have that capability that much anymore. I mean, of course, there's not a physical newspaper anymore, but how many people actually are reading the entire stories that are in the news? How many
Yeah.
people are actually aware of what's happening in their own community, whether small or large? I know my grandfather would read a newspaper every day, and he read it, cover to cover. He read the sports section, he read the national section, he read the local news, and now we're we're just getting fragmented bits of things that are being digitally um, made to incite us and to, it's clickbait, but it's also rage for profit. And it's a shame. I see that all the time. I just see people that really are not um, well versed in the topics that they're really mad about, but they're just digesting quick little bites and quick little headlines. And most people, they don't even know what they're looking at. Is this real? Is this fake? Is
Hmm.
it probably, it's a terrible time. And I really mourn the time of journalism when I worked for a paper that had a long, proud standing tradition. And that the fact that if you read it in the paper, we were held to the facts. Everybody knew that. Nobody said this is fake news when we were reading the newspaper back then. But the digital age has made people crazy. And number two, I don't think that I think there's a large set of the population that can't read books. I don't think they have, I mean, I don't think they have the attention span to sit down and read a 350-page book
Yeah.
of capacity. And I think the idea, certainly, I think for men are the worst. I think for a man to actually sit down and think of a book as a form of entertainment, I don't think they can even comprehend it. I mean, there are men readers, male readers, and I'm
Yeah.
very happy to have them. I'm great. But for the most part, men, I mean, they're watching Sports Center or they're watching, Rage cable news channels and whatever. And it's just a feeding of your mind of garbage.
Exactly.
And I hate that because there's nothing better for me than to watch a film, listen to an album, or read a book. And I think that ultimately makes you a more empathetic, more rounded person. And we're losing that in society, no doubt.
Yeah, they want the 24-hour news ticker and then it's,
Mm.
it's gone. And you made the comment about Sports Center. If you've got YouTube TV, you're not watching it right now. So
Yeah, everything, and it's so funny. You sit down, and I like to take a book with me to lunch
yeah.
and sit down with a book. And as I'm waiting for my food, and I'll read and get a cup of coffee and whatever. And I mean, people can't, they cannot survive without that quick hit of dopamine and
Hmm.
getting that little whatever they're reading. But it's making people nuts.
Yeah. It's the
I
it's
wish
the
people would unplug, and it's not good for my business.
yeah,
Terrible
it's
for
the
my
it's the
business.
doom scroll. People just, they get 2 or 3 seconds. If it doesn't interest them, then they're gone.
Yeah, I used to always hear, and I'd hear people, and I think it's absolutely true, as you say that, reading a book was like a workout for your mind, that it was something to make you stronger and a more intelligent person. And I think it is. I think it's something that you're sitting and you're reading a 350, 400-page book. You're, reading through it, whether it's entertainment or whether it's something that's nonfiction or whatever you're reading. And I just think people have lost the capability of just being able to sit down and read a book. And that's crazy. It's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. And I hate it because, like I said, I'm in a very old-fashioned line of work. This is
Yeah.
this is what I do. I don't really have any other skill set.
So I wanted to talk about the standalones versus your series. So I know you've got had the Quinn series, which I love. That will be my fangirl moment right there. Just because I can honestly say this. Let me back this up. I never would have guessed that I would be a crime fiction. Like I will take the darker, pulpy, noir, like gritty. I love it. I thought I would always like a psychological thriller. Near, I'm over it. So I'm now I'm in this crime fiction like tunnel. So you've got the Quinn series, and then you've got standalones, and now you're taking the Spenser series, right? Am
I'm
I
not
right?
I'm not doing that anymore. I did that for 10 years, but that
But you're
was
not
I'm
anymore.
not that's I that chapter is closed, but it was fun though.
So how do you feel about the standalones versus the series, or like even taking on somebody else's work? Like which one do you enjoy the most?
I do enjoy, I'll give you a political answer, but it is the truth, which is I enjoy writing them all. I mean, each book is different. Every book has its own challenge. Even when you're carrying over somebody's work, like the very famous Robert B. Parker, his wife, his late wife, who became a dear friend of mine, Joan Parker, chose me out of countless writers to be able to continue her husband's work, which really was so personal and important to her to find the right writer, which I love doing, and I learned very much from that experience. But I really had a lot of fun, and I'm still having fun. They're not over with writing Quinn Colson, and I love the idea with a series of being able to go back and revisit a world, and to be able to go back and see what those characters are doing. Some people don't like with a series where people age and grow and change, and I disagree. I mean, some people think that that is confusing to readers, or people want to see somebody just stuck in a certain time frame. But what I wanted to do with the Quinn Colson books, there are 11 of them currently, is you see things change. I mean, Quinn Colson was a guy in the Army. He comes home to North Mississippi. He finds his world completely overrun with corruption, and essentially what he found when he was a young soldier in Afghanistan, where he's finding, drug running and hypocrisy and political corruption, and just all those things that he thought, he was fighting against, he's finding in his own backyard. So eventually in the series, he runs for sheriff, he becomes sheriff, and in the course of the books, he gets married, he has a kid, people come, people go in the county, people get older, people die. And so I love that, being able to have my own kind of sandbox to play in and to create that world and to see how things are going. So that is a lot of fun. And then the standalone stuff, or just the books that they're not part of a series, are a lot of fun too. And the majority of those were based on actual historic events. So I did a book about the famous gangster Machine Gun Kelly. That book was set in 1933. I did a book about a Hollywood trial that had always fascinated me. This guy named Roscoe Arbuckle, that was a silent film comedian from 1921. And so I go really down the rabbit hole when I'm writing those books. I spent, when I was writing those books, I spent a lot of time researching 1921 or 1933, or did a book about Tampa in the 1950s. So those have their own particular, complications as far as doing the research, and part of the rewards, part of them that make them a lot of fun. But writing a series like Quinn Colson is maybe I'll say is the most fun for me.
When you have to lose a character, like that's a part of your person through the series? Is that hard for you as a writer to lose a character?
I'll tell you this: I would never lose a character that I feel like is going to really mess up the series. So I might take a break from them for a while. There's the guy who's the heavy, who's kind of you guys will understand this being in the South, is, you always have in your county, you've got your local uh, guy who is taking political payoffs and is the mover and shaker guy, and he's the person that is running the county commission or the county supervisors, and he's the money guy, whatever. In the Quinn Colson books is a guy named Johnny Stagg, and I love writing. Johnny's just horrible person, but just a lot of fun to write because he just has no filter in his mouth. And he had to go to jail for a little bit, and he was replaced. And then I was able to bring him back, but I would never kill him off because he was so much damn fun.
When you see other authors so sometimes when I'm reading authors who are writing from a Southern perspective, who have not been down here and do
Yeah.
not get it. It's so cliche, and it's very frustrating for me as a reader to see it, knowing how you nail it. Like you put us right there in it, and you do. Like, I mean, I can't tell you like my county because that would just blow everything up. But I'm small town, small county. There's nobody I don't know. You can't, like, you go to the IGA and the next day they'll ask you, so how were those ribs? So how does it make you feel as a writer when you see somebody that is so cliche and they flub it up?
It's frustrating, because I don't necessarily think that they have to do it. I think that you can go somewhere. I think that maybe if you're not from the South, you can come here, but you gotta put the work in, and you gotta learn about it. You've got to spend some time here, and you've got to be able to write about it. You've got to make it authentic. But no, it is frustrating. I mean, there's just there's a certain vision, like of the South, that you see in film and you see in TVs, and it's just so hokey and over the top and sugary, and or it's horrible, that it's the worst place on the planet, that it's filled like it's complicated. It's all those things. I mean, there are parts of it that are South that are terrible, but there's a lot of stuff that is really wonderful and beautiful. Um, but yeah, I hate those books. I don't read them. If I get into a book, and they're
I
always the ones that are real over the top about the South. They're the ones that you read them in the back. So this guy was, born and raised in Northern Illinois, and you're like, well, that's not the South.
I was talking to Sean Cosby back at BocherCon in New Orleans,
Yeah,
and at a panel he said that he's a southern writer, but he's a northern southern writer.
yeah,
He's from the Virginia area, and he said y'all forget that Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy.
yeah.
He said we're south. He said this is considered southern, but to me, and I agree with that, what he writes is very southern and very very authentic.
Yeah.
I just that section of the country to me, if it's not Tennessee or South, it's not Southern, but it is when you look at it in the big picture, I guess you could say.
I think there's parts you can put off. We that Sean and I talk. Sean is a very good friend of mine. He's terrific, and I think when you get into the areas that he writes about in rural Virginia, it is very much, like I said, there's certain carve outs even in Georgia that I said that's not necessarily culturally very Southern, but that area that he writes about is very Southern. And you can even say that, obviously parts of East Texas, like with the great Joe Lansdale that he writes about. I always consider
Yeah,
Texas to be another country, but the way that he writes about it, it is very Southern. So
yeah,
you know it when you see it, or you know it when you read it.
exactly. I actually talked to him yesterday, and he was an incredible guy. I had no idea some of the stuff that he wrote, but that was very interesting. That'll be coming
He's a,
out soon, so
he's a
you'll
terrific
have to
writer, terrific writer.
yes. Um, you use a lot of music in even not this book has got a lot of music in it, but your other books has a lot of music, and you're close to Muscle Shoals. It's not that far. That's almost like Memphis. A lot of people don't realize, Aretha Franklin got her start at Muscle Shoals. A lot of the big soul and R&B folks came out of Muscle Shoals. What do you, how do you relate your music and what you enjoy into your writing?
I think it goes back to, what we were talking about earlier, Scott, about, being a kid in the 80s where, you had books and you had your music, you had your albums, and then you had your film or whatever. And all those things were equally as important. They all influenced me the same. And to learn about places, as I got older, I think I didn't really wasn't aware of a lot of the deep cultural cuts of the South until I probably was, later in high school or into college. And you learn about places like Muscle Shoals, where, not only did you have uh, Aretha, but you had Wilson Pickett, but you also had the Rolling Stones coming in
Hmm.
at the with the height of their career, just to get a sense of that sound. Or a place like Stax Records in Memphis, where you had countless great people like Otis Redding and Johnny Taylor and Booker T and MGs, and of course, that guy Elvis. You get all that stuff. I learned a lot, and I particularly learned a lot very early on in my writing, from a lot of the blues singers, and Buddy Waters and Robert Johnson, and I learned so much about writing and feeling and mood from those Southern artists. And so not only am I reading, William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor and that kind of thing, but equally, I learned a lot about writing, and I learned about a lot about word choice and pacing and rhythm and all that stuff from those great Southern artists. But yeah, we've got Muscle Shoals and Memphis, Nashville. It's all the great music. All is there.
You mentioned Faulkner. Uh, you being, from the Oxford area, that could almost arguably be the southern launch pad or the southern epicenter of southern fiction. from Muscle Shoals. Not Muscle Shoals, from Oxford. I mean, you're there. Grisham started there. I mean, there was so many influential
Yeah,
Southern writers from
sure.
Oxford.
I mean, that's eventually, or that's really was a catalyst for me moving here. Um, 25, 30 years ago, Willie Morris was here teaching at the university. You had this guy, Larry Brown, who had just started publishing, who had been a firefighter here in Oxford, is a tremendous novelist. Barry Hanna, one of the legendary Mississippi Southern short story writers, he was here teaching. And so when I first moved here, and then Grisham was here at the same time. And
Yeah.
Grisham, I think by the time I got here, he had moved to Virginia. Willie Morris had moved to Jackson, Mississippi, but Larry Brown was still here, and so was Barry Hanna, and they got to be very, very dear friends of mine. They're wonderful. They had been heroes of mine, and then to be able to live in the same community with them was amazing, and they were wonderful friends and just genius, legendary authors. And then here now, I think all of it. I mean, I think it started with Faulkner. I think Faulkner ends up facilitating people wanting to live here, but now it's me and Michael Ferris Smith and William Boyle and Tom Franklin, his wife Beth Ann Finley, and no, I'm missing so many people, but there's
Oh
a
yeah.
just a great tradition of Southern writers that have come here, and it's a good play. I mean, we have a great bookstore. I think a lot of the credit to that is the fact that we have Square Books that
Yeah.
has, uh, you know, every week is bringing in national writers and national authors down here. It's a real mecca for Southern writing, and has been for quite some time.
Yeah.
So I got to go back to, I got to ask a question about
No, go
Lily.
ahead.
Is
Yeah.
she based on somebody that you know? Like, is she based on a real
Lily
person?
Virgil, who's
Yeah.
Lily? Lily Virgil is one of my favorite characters. Like, if you could say that, that sounds kind of crazy, but one of the favorite people. I love Lily Virgil is the chief deputy under Quinn Colson in the Quinn books. And Lily's a straight shooter. She is very much unfiltered. She says what she means. She was a member of the Ole Miss rifle team. She's kind of a Calamity Jane type character. I think part of Lily, when I covered law enforcement and covered the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, and I covered the Tampa Police Department. I mean, I got to meet a lot of very tough, direct women in law enforcement. And I think that she came from a lot of that. And she also is very direct and unfiltered and straight ahead. And in many ways, some people might say is a lot like my wife. So it kind of is all of that stuff. I am in no way like Quinn Colson. Quinn is a different character for me altogether. But yeah, Lily, I had the fortune of working with a lot of really sharp women in law enforcement. One of them was a detective, and at the time I was there, became a captain of the Tampa Police Department named Jane Castor. Now Jane is the mayor of Tampa, and she was a great investigator. So fortunately, again, goes back to my newspaper days.
So I want to throw you for a loop with a question. If Quinn Colson had a therapist, what do you think his first session would look like?
Oh man, if Quinn ever got into therapy, there'd be a
It would never
lot to
happen.
there would be that would be I mean, he famously as a boy was lost in the woods for uh, many, many days, and they thought he was dead, and he had to make himself keep himself alive in the deep forest of North Mississippi. His father left the family when he was a young kid so he could go out to Hollywood, although it's explained in more detail why he did that in a book called The Forsaken. But his dad was a stuntman that was a stuntman for Burt Reynolds and Lee Majors back in the day in the 70s. So I think he'd have some abandonment issues, and then I think there probably is a fair amount of maybe a little bit of PTSD from his time where he was U.S. Army Ranger in Afghanistan. Although I talk a little bit about that, and I try to use a lot of experiences that there was a guy in particular for Quinn. It seems almost like a cliche now that you have all these books where the ex-military guy comes home and ex-military does this, whatever. By the time Quinn came about, there weren't really a lot of people writing about veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. That was relatively a very new thing because soldiers were just returning home from war. And I had the fortune of have help a guy helping me. He was a young Ranger lieutenant, and many of the stories that Quinn relates about his time in the Army are based on that guy's service. But they're not, it's hard to explain with the books, and you guys will understand this from reading them. They're not overly macho, tough guy, alpha. That's not, I mean, Quinn is just like a lot of people that we knew. I grew up and buddies of mine, their dads were in Vietnam, and their buddy of mine, his grandfather had been a captain in World War II and whatever. They didn't necessarily wear it on their sleeves, and they didn't necessarily talk about it a lot. And I think Quinn is kind of cut from that same cloth.
Yeah.
When you write like tougher subjects like loyalty loss, um the weight of Quinn coming home, different and across all of the series, when those subjects, when that matter comes through, is that hard for you to write? Like, I because it is like you have to balance that where Quinn is a it's a man, and then but your readers are women, and then you have to, who are you going to make mad when you get into those things, like you said, the PTSD or whatever. Are those tough subjects to write about?
I think, for each book has its own unique challenges, but I think is the main thing when you're writing about stuff of very, my new book, the last two books, there's some pretty weighty, heavy duty stuff that happens in them, but for the most part, I really want them to be read as comedies. And I don't mean satire, that kind of thing, but I hope that they have a lot of comedic moments. I think there's funny stuff in Quinn. There's some funny stuff between Lily and Quinn, and there's, I think, some comedic moments with some of the bad guys, that kind of thing. But there's some really dark stuff that happens in those books too. I think the main thing for me, yeah, it's tough to write that stuff. And I think what's tough to write it is you write about it authentically, and you really care how it is affecting your characters. And you're not writing it as just, I always tell people when I write, characters come first. I mean, Quinn Colson came first, Lily Virgil came first, and this book, Peter Bennett came first, Hotchner came first, and those characters decide what that story is going to be that I'm going to tell, and the way that that story is told by the way they act. And I know other writers, especially like a lot of like we'd call like or used to call airport thriller writers or serial killer writers or whatever, is the characters are essentially like set pieces. They're or chess pieces where they're just moving them around the board, but it's only important of how they're figuring into the actual story, not exactly how they're affected. But I take this characters very seriously, and I really, yeah, it's tough to write those deeply emotional scenes, and it can be draining, and and you want to get it right, and especially when you care about your characters. I mean, you really should. I don't write these characters because I just kind of went off of them, whatever. I mean, I might as well get into another line of work. In some strange ways, they kind of become like family. You spend, you spend so much time with them.
So what's next for you? I know that everybody wants to rule the world's coming, but then what's coming after that?
Well, I've been involved in a lot of, or I've been involved in some TV stuff. My last novel, Don't Let the Devil Ride, has been is in being developed by some really very talented people right now, and I'm involved in that process. And that news just was announced last week, but it's been actually in the works for some time. And that's the story about a character that very Memphis character, a guy who's a detective, private detective named Porter Hayes, who takes on the case of a woman who was her husband had been missing for 10 days, and she had not heard from him. And when she hires a detective to find out where he's been, it just is Pandora's box of finding out who this guy really is, that he's really um, um, not who she expected, but also a really bad guy. And so that's Don't Let the Devil Ride is in development right now. There's a Quinn Colson show that's in development right now. So I've been doing a lot of kind of like side TV stuff. and working on some other projects. Hopefully, I'd love for Quinn to come back soon. Maybe working on a Porter Hayes. I'm not sure. I've taken a little bit of break after Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Uh, but something fun will be coming up next.
If our viewers want to get an autographed copy or a signed copy of your books, where can they get those?
They can go directly to Square Books here in Oxford, Mississippi. I can sign them, I can personalize them, anything they want. Square Books is your one-stop place to get all all things
I
Ace
kind of
Atkins.
figured that,
They
but I
got, they
wanted
got,
to,
I
I
mean, in
kind of,
fact, I'm where I am, you can't see the way the camera is, but I'm looking at my window and I can see Square Books over there. So it's not a huge effort to walk across the
oh,
street,
wow.
sign a book.
I kind of figured that, but I wanted you to say it.
Yes, yeah, very easy.
Ace, what are your handles for your social media in case people need to find you?
Well, it's good to have a name like Ace Atkins because you don't have a lot of competition. So you can find me Ace Atkins on Facebook. You can find me Ace Atkins on Instagram, and then aceatkins.com. And so
Okay.
those are the quickest, easiest ways to find me.
Awesome. Will you be going on a tour with this book?
I am. I'm going to go on 8, 9 city tours across the United States. Hopefully, with the airline situation, will right itself. But I'll be on the West Coast and the East Coast and the Deep South and all that. But all that information, if you go to aceatkins.com, has all of the tour dates and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, for in about 2 weeks, I'll be out promoting Everybody Wants to Rule the World. So I'm excited about that.
Teresa, you got anything else? Thank you so much, Mr. Atkins. It was
Thank
a
you
pleasure
guys.
to meet you.
Thank you.
Will you happen to be in Nashville for your tour?
I was in Nashville last year for the Southern Festival of Books.
Okay.
I do not think I'm going to be in Nashville this year, but hopefully again very soon. But I was going to tell you, Teresa, thank you for asking about Lily. I really appreciate that. She's one of my favorite. I just every time she comes on the page, I just have so much fun writing her. So thanks for asking about her.
Well, her name is spelled like my daughter Lily. So it's one of
Oh,
those like it sticks out,
yep,
and I'll always remember her.
yep.
So
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Good luck with the sales. I hope you have
Thank
a number one uh, come next week or a couple of weeks. Um, and if there's anything we can do to help you get the word out, we'll do it.
I think y'all are doing it. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.